6 o'clock, and we're calling the Sustainability Committee meeting August 17th, 2023 to order at this moment. And Tommy, would you mind taking a roll call?
Be my pleasure. Chairperson Denise Menino.
Here.
Member Carol Meckett.
Present.
Member Taylor Mandalou is absent. Member Dory Larson.
Here.
Member Karen Gallagher.
Excuse.
Absent. Oh, yes, excused. You're right.
Excused. I'm sorry, I should have requested that at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that after we take roll call. And alternate member Robin Sanger.
Right here.
And alternate member Jennifer Bracey is absent.
And Karen Gallagher did call in advance 2 days of the meeting and said that she couldn't be here. Do we have a motion to excuse her absence?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. And I hope everyone has had a chance to look at the minutes, and
Yes.
they're pretty straightforward.
I make a motion to approve last meeting's minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we have no members of the public here at this time, so we can move right into our discussion number 3. It's on urban forestry. Shannon, we're delighted that you're here. We're really eager to hear all of the information that you've acquired through the survey, and we thank you.
Thank you for letting me come back and talk to you. That work? That one right there. That work? Okay. Tonight, I just want to give you an overview of our project that's been going on. Again, this is from our tree grant that we acquired from the USDA. I do want to look at some current tree laws that are affecting street trees, since this project was all about street trees. We'll go over some project findings that we have and some key issues for the inventory, as well as our social survey results that we did. And then a little brief talk about maybe a management plan and a vision. So, like all grant recipients are supposed to do, we have to say thank you. And very, very grateful for the USDA. And this is a pass-through grant to the Florida Forest Service through FDACS, or the Florida Department of Agriculture. And I do have to make sure I show the disclaimer statement. So there we are. So to refresh your memory, the purpose of this project, to begin measuring and identifying key issues and make operational and policy adjustments, working towards the goals. So as a sustainability committee since 2019, you guys are familiar that you've been looking at natural environmental action items, and this inventory has stuck through all of the revisions. And also it made it into the strategic plan as well. So this really is an implementation of your 2 policies and your 2 plans. So I want to give credit to that. When I met with you before, it was at the very beginning. We were project setup, getting ready for our interns. They are phenomenal people. I have to give them credit. We are so ahead of schedule than what I initially thought of back in the day when we were putting this all together. We are now summarizing. I'm able to bring you the raw data. This is not the final data. I want to make that clear. We are working on one last final report as I'll walk you through this, but we are ahead of schedule, and that is all thanks to our interns. So diving right into the policy, the 2 sections really that relate to trees we have in our ordinances currently is section 133, and that's the tree protection and preservation side. And then we also have section 134, and that deals with the landscaping side. So within 133, maintenance, which is on the left-hand side, as well as tree removal and the permitting process is talked about. To briefly go over it, the trees that are 4 inches in diameter, so not circumference, but across the tree, that are 4 inches wide or larger, and not one of the 26 species that are exempt, are protected in the city. So if it's a dead tree, if it's a live tree, that's a pine, or not one of the 26, you will be required to get a permit for it. The maintenance side. Currently, homeowners are responsible for the maintenance. So as you can see in the slide on the left, the piece, as we call it, the clear zone, it is 14 feet over the roadway and 10 feet from over top of an improved right-of-way or sidewalk area. And if anyone has seen a crew doing tree work, it's more than likely going to have been Duke. The city does not currently have a crew to go out and do this work. It is predominantly done by Duke Energy at this point. And then, of course, the homeowners. I did mention briefly the 26 species. The only one I can enforce removal on is Brazilian pepper. And it has to be from a lot that has a certificate of occupancy. We've tried it in the past. Code enforcement has tried to go after ponds. They've tried to go over those HOA common areas, and unfortunately, it did fail in higher courts. So currently, the only one is Brazilian pepper from a CO'd property. With the permit process, the city prefers that inch per inch replacement occurs. That means so whatever amount of biomass, physical mass, or wood that you take off the property, say it's 20 inches, to divide that 20 inches back up and replant in smaller trees that equal up to those 20. So you could do a 3-inch tree, you could do a 4-inch palm, you can mix it all together as long as, and I'll show in the landscaping standard size, as long as it's not more than 25% palm species. So we do have a replacement plan written into those. There is a fee in lieu. Those fees do go into the tree bank, and that's what funds the giveaways and other city projects, as well as the matching sides for this project that we've done today. Another one that is affecting street trees is the new tree law, or the revised 2022 revision to the 163.045 section. If it's on single-family detached homes, no permit, notice to the city, no replacement fees are required if it meets a standard set document and it has been documented by an ISA arborist or a landscape architect. And there's words in there where it has to meet, which falls in line with our ISA standards. So that is really affecting our tree permit numbers. They really have dropped. And as well as that, it's the replacement fees. So our tree bank mitigation budget has dropped in there as well. So that's really been the most impactful out of those laws that I've seen so far.
Do you mind if I pause for a question, or would you prefer?
Up to you,
at the
however
end?
you want to do this.
Well, I'm just afraid that I won't remember, but we're talking about city property, correct, along the roads, and not what's literally on somebody's property, like my neighbor had to remove a jacaranda,
Right. I want to get into that discussion in a different, as where we divide, I was,
So later in the.
yeah,
talk,
I
okay.
really, I want to work that out. I think you guys are the movers and shakers of this, possibly talking about this policy, this ordinance section. If it's something that needs to be addressed. The next year is the section where we have to do the urban forestry management plan. And I would like to address a lot of these key issues that I'm seeing during that time frame. And that is dictated by our grant that we have for next year's part of it.
Yes.
Shannon, could you just go over what you just went over one more time so that I can
For-
fully understand about the,
The 163?
yes, please.
The wording, it does meet our standards. They have to use the tree risk matrix. If it's the ANSI standards, that it's for tree risk assessment. And it has to be a tree that is cannot be mitigated to less than moderate. So if you have a high risk or an extreme risk tree, but you can prune it to reduce it down to below moderate, then it would not qualify. It has to be that removal is the only way to reduce, get down to under moderate. Though,
Can you
Depending-
describe the situation?
so.
Yeah, I'm still not following, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, is it a tree that like with the jacaranda, it broke, it fell into our fence, it broke our fence. So I mean, that was a tree that it was deemed to be unhealthy, and I think it
But-
was probably improper pruning.
So high, the healthy part
Uh-huh,
can go into the tree risk maintenance part, the tree risk assessment, but it's risk of structure predominantly. You have to have a target in order to have, risk, right? You gotta have a person or a house or something to, if it's in a vacant lot, no risk, no, if there's no target, there's no risk. It'd be a great discussion to really go and dive into if you want to. I do have a PowerPoint on ISA arborist and why you should use them, and I do go through those tree matrices. Maybe I can send it to Tommy so you guys could look at it, and maybe we can do another walkthrough of it. But the way the statute says it, that if there's no other way to get it below moderate, does that tree actually qualify?
What does below moderate mean?
If you can move the bench from underneath the tree, if you can prune something that's maybe dead out of the tree, if there's other ways to, and you follow the likelihood of failure with the likelihood of impact, how severe or, is that impact going to be, and then you walk through the matrix. I think it'd be better as a visual. That's what I'm saying. I'd rather give that to you. It's a lot better as a visual.
Can I just ask another way, though? Because you were saying the impact. I just want to understand the impact, not necessarily the nitty-gritty of it. But you said that it's not paying into the tree ordinance. Does that mean fewer people are cutting down trees, so there's less money going into the
They're not
tree bank?
necessarily fewer cutting down trees, but they're not getting permits for them because they're using the letter or the risk assessment of 163.045.
So people are getting a waiver, cutting down their tree, getting a waiver, and then they're not having to pay into the tree bank or replace
Correct.
trees.
And we
Thank
don't
you.
even
Okay, that's what I was
And we don't
not
even know that they're
understanding.
doing it unless it's someone calls in.
Okay.
Because they are not required to provide notice to the city.
Thank you.
But
Okay.
if you hire somebody to trim your trees or to remove a tree, like a company, they have to follow this and get the permit or.
If they have an
No.
arborist on staff and they can provide that service to you.
Ah,
Not all tree companies out there have ISA certified arborists. And that's actually another part of that presentation I have as well to describe that. The tree industry is not currently licensed. We do not have a license like an electrician or general contractor. The ISA and their lobbyists have been working towards that diligently. But currently, if they say license, they mean like a local business tax
Interesting.
and workman's comp.
So, one more question. If someone wants to remove a tree and they think that it falls within the realm of where they don't have to do anything, they can just take it down. Someone, a resident sees them taking down the tree, contacts the city, what happens then?
They usually call me out. I'll go see if, they've got a risk assessment letter. But that letter is directed usually towards the homeowner, and it's the homeowner's responsibility. And it's there. And there's actually some civil law, there's some potential, I don't know if it's a lawsuit or whatever, but some of those things are being reviewed in courts.
So is it the onus of the homeowner to to contact the city? Or no?
No.
They don't have to?
They don't have to. They're completely exempt from all of that.
So say somebody calls about it, you go out there, you see if they have the letter. If they have the letter, then basically that's it, you walk away.
Right, if they want to provide it.
But they don't have to provide it.
oh, there's,
Thank you.
there's really no teeth to this experience.
So I am not an expert in it. If you want me to find you an expert, I can probably do that.
Yeah, I'd like to
and
understand
to
the
have a
risk
meeting with them.
assessment letter, and how do they obtain the risk assessment letter?
Through an ISA certified arborist or a landscape architect.
Right.
I don't want to
okay.
misstep on that because there is a lot of legal issues. So I'd rather prefer someone talk to you about it that is knowledgeable I do have one particular board-certified master arborist that's been dealing with that. We are lucky enough to have in the area. Maybe he'd be willing to come in and talk to you about it. But I am not an expert by any means. I understand what the wording says, and I can recognize what a report looks like. That's one of my trainings. I am a tree risk assessment qualified arborist, as well as a municipal specialist arborist, which means like certified's here, and I've taken extra levels to go up. But really, that's a lot of legal stuff, and if you really want to ask those questions, I will be more than happy to find you somebody.
And I'd just love to see the letter, if it's possible for us to see what's included in the risk assessment letter.
There's 18 different pieces to a risk assessment, but again, we could go down this and talk about it all day.
Yeah, well, I don't want to, oh, hey, Carol?
So, okay, so I own a house. I mean, you've been to my house, you've looked at my trees. But I would never know. If I want to remove a tree, I would call, I removed a tree on my property and removed a rubber tree because it was being very invasive, and even you told me we should get rid of it. So I just called a tree person, and they came in with their crew, and they cut it down, chopped it up, and took it away. Now, it never dawned on me that I had to do anything. And I'm sure I am not alone on this. So, and this seems very complicated, and there's this and there's that. So I guess my question is, how does the normal citizen of Tarpon Springs know what's required of them? Because, I mean, we're having people come to trim our trees, and I would rely on that person to tell me, you need a permit to trim your mangroves, or you need a permit to take this tree down, but now you're saying that most of these tree people may not even know that that has to happen.
Well, a couple things going on there.
Okay.
One, your rubber tree is exempt from permitting. Two, you did the right thing, you called. I have given seminars as part of the Knowledge to Nibble series about hiring a certified arborist. I have done that. And as you see actually through the rest of this, the community in the social survey part is begging for knowledge. And that was something that really came out at me. So when I get to that part, they are asking for knowledge. They are asking for more education. On our city website currently, I do have a tree and site information tab underneath the building development tab that they can go on there. They can access all of my information. I do have frequently asked questions on there as well. Now, hopefully, the individual is hiring a professional company, that they have an arborist. That individual has had training. They understand that there's, every place is different. The landscapers that are removing trees, hopefully they follow proper permitting procedures. In the past, I have been a part of code enforcement cases where they have not. Again, hopefully they're trusting the right individual. And that is a different part of my presentation on that other one that I have for the knowledge and nibbles. So
Okay, thank you, and we'll go ahead and continue. I know you've got a long presentation.
I
but-
do, and
Oh,
Just a quickie.
Okay.
Just a quickie. So I don't know if this is like congealing everybody's questions. But what I would be interested in is speaking with a professional, not a professional, a legal professional, to see what teeth our ordinance has, what supersedes our ordinance, what are the possibilities of strengthening our ordinance that could give us more traction with it, and that's kind of basically it.
okay.
Tommy.
I might, excuse me. This is actually one of the action items is the net zero canopy loss policy for year one of the sustainability plan.
Okay.
So this is definitely going to be a topic du jour. So this is definitely a good topic for future committee presentation, maybe October, November, something like that. Once we get the sustainability coordinator up and running and kicked off, we'll probably be bringing something back to you relatively soon.
And you're all thinking already, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And this is why I wanted to come talk to you. You know, you are my advocates. You are the city's tree advocates. And this is exactly why I thought working with you and collaborating with you would be the best way to do an urban forestry management plan. You're already thinking. You all come from different backgrounds in your life. You all have different perspectives. You all are residents. And that's why, you know, going to the knowledgeable people that are the movers and shakers in the community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully quickly to go through the landscaping side. Our tree planting schedule hasn't been revised since 2006. It is time to do that. But the one thing that really is awesome that Tarpon is doing is requiring a Florida #1 or better tree. I don't know if you're familiar with grades and standards of trees. There's a little picture there on the side. I know it's difficult to see. Hopefully the pointer will work.
You can make it bigger. Oh, I can make it bigger on mine. Make it bigger.
Okay, so this section in here where the arrow is pointing, this is actually a grade #2 tree, but if you prune it in a certain way, you could actually increase the grade. So there is that aspect, and I have been doing that with developers and new people that are having homes built. I really am sticking to the grade and standard. I have actually made multiple people or projects replace those trees in order. So starting off with a good baseline nursery tree is really important, and I commend the city for already having that to put into play. Revisions do happen to the grades and standards. The last one was in 2015. And as part of the management plan, we do need to start looking at that tree replacement and maybe, you know, work on some. 2 of those actually are on the invasive species list. And as you'll see later, we do have quite a lot of trees that are on our approved tree list that are actually on the invasive species list as the Florida Pest Council.
So one thing it says here, shall be grade Florida 1 or better. How can you be better than grade 1?
There's a Florida Fancy.
A fancy.
There is a Florida Fancy.
Oh,
So when
Florida fancy.
when the magnolias went in, those were actually Florida Fancies. The set of 3 up there, the one in the front is my favorite. It's a Miss Chloe. So if you ever wanted to know a secret thing about me, that's my favorite tree. So this is our project area. In the red, it was actually what the grant we requested to do. But back to our fabulous set of interns, they were able to expand that. So we use the water in the bayou as well as the Anclote River and US 19 as our new boundary. We did stick within the CRA district as the farthest east boundary line because where the yellow is, that I've already applied for another grant through the Inflation Reduction Act to hopefully get that section inventoried as well. One thing I do want to point out as we go through the numbers, there's a lot of city-managed land in this area. We have the mangrove section next to the water. I'll talk more about why I really went through the mangroves. Craig Park is in there. We've got the trail. We've got the nature park and the dog park, city-managed parking lots. So some, I believe, as we'll go through it, the conflicts are going to be a little skewed because we have such large areas that don't have any conflicts because of that managed land. So I really want to point out, you know, think of that as we go through some of the numbers tonight. Oh, and thank you, Ms. Pat. This is why Ms. Pat's influential in this. The right-of-way, we defined it as up to 10 feet from back of curb. We do have curbs in a lot of this area, but when we got to a vacant lot, Park Avenue does not have any curbs, or the brick streets that, you know, are starting to not, if you can't find it because they're overgrown, from the pavement back to 10 feet. So that's what we defined. Full credit again, great team. There is one missing from this photo. 2 of them are currently environmental GIS students at USF. The one on the right is actually just graduated and going in for his master's. So, and then John, our fourth one, he actually worked for the National Park Service. They were phenomenal people. Let me tell you, phenomenal people. So what did they find? We have 4,114 trees located within our project area. I was taken back, but 28, which is the top percent, which is the number one, is actually a cabbage palm or a sable palm. Then comes the oak. And then also there's a lot of mangroves in there. They're dense, they're, very small plants, so you actually get a lot of those numbers. And the top 15 species actually makes up 90% of our total street tree. The mangroves, as you can see, are very prevalent. They make up 24% of the total number, but only 1% of the land mass. So keep that in perspective. Like I told you, I was going to tell you about it. FEMA, disaster response. Say we have a large disaster, we have to go into the mangroves and remove a boat or a home. The city will have to apply for a mangrove destruction permit, alteration permit. That's the word I'm looking for. So knowing where and how many in this area is going to be crucial if we ever do have a disaster and have to go in there. So why not have them go measure it? And that's what I did. The city in the area that we do measure they're the ones that the city maintains with only areas that we did. So we didn't go into like homeowners' properties or any of that. We stuck to the city maintained shorelines. So as the Florida Invasive Species Council list it comes from 2019.
Could we go back to the map, and could you point out on the map where the mangroves are that are in the city maintained land?
I can't see. Yes. So from Craig Park all the way down shore. Oh, I can't do two tools at once. Okay. Come on.
Okay, so around
It's
Wickham
where the
Bayou.
project's gonna go. And rip them
They're
up.
gonna keep them
Around the
mangroves.
bayous, we maintain those. Also, at the splash park, dog park area, those,
Okay.
there are some, surprisingly, there's a trail. No, it's not gonna let me do it again. So, where the splash park comes in and the trail starts to come in here, there's a big area of mangroves, and you can see that blob
by
right
City
there.
Hall here.
Is it considered in the city if it's in the Anclote? Because I paddle all around those.
Bits
they're
and
right-
pieces are. We did not go, as you can see, deep into the area to be able to get those. As another layer, maybe in the future, I would like to do some spatial measuring of those areas, depending upon their percentage of, like, if we go in there and see that it's like 85% Brazilian pepper, then we can calculate, how much in that area. But that's a different project. So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So camphor, it is on our invasive species list for this Florida. It's on the city's approved list, and it makes up 28.6% of our canopy. So if we wanted to do an invasive removal, 28% of our street trees would be removed. So and the other one is the rosewood that's on there. Within this area, Australian pine was at 6.7%. Queen palm, it is actually on the invasive species list, and they all line dodecanese, or dodecanese. And so there's some key areas that actually have quite a bit of invasive species. And then we also have the Washingtonian as well. So that would be, if you added up all those numbers of the 4.5%, that would be quite high.
Is it your goal to replace them like go slowly and just kind of replace anything that's invasive with something that's on the approved list?
That'd be a great project if we could find the funding, and I would totally support it. But that would be another conversation to have on a separate day of, and actually in like the management plan, do we make that one of those top hot button items, you know? And then also with your sustainability plan and the strategic plan, if, you know, if we correlate them all together, is that an action item? So,
Could you explain, for example, with the queen palm or the Mexican fan palm, they're invasive, but what damage do they do?
I would love to find you an expert on that.
Okay,
The website that is on there, if you go to the Florida invasive species, they actually explain on there their methodology and how they do it. There is another invasive list by the University of Florida, if you want to consider that. It's called the Florida UFSA. And they have different species on different aspects of, you know, their invasiveness, or if they're something that needs to be controlled. So another discussion would be, if as we change our list, do we go with one list? Do we go with two lists? Do we do what the city has done before and only pick a few different species? You know, that's definitely another action item.
because, I mean, like the Australian pine, that sort of spreads,
Yes.
but I don't think a queen palm really spreads.
I will go on there and I will try to find out everything about the queen palm for you, that, you know, and find that.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they're invasive, but you know, when you hear invasive, you say, that's not good.
And there's a category 1 and a category 2. Category 1s are the Australian pines, the camphor. A category 2 would be the rosewood. And so there's different layers of the onion. So
Thank you. Fascinating.
conflicts. You can go see in the streets, you drive down the road, you're going to find a conflict very well. Like I said before, a lot of our area is managed land by the city. We have a huge park. We have the mangroves that, you know, don't have a conflict. So that number to me could be potentially skewed, but it is in our project area and this is the data. Next slide. There we go. So research has shown that urban street trees only stay in the ground for about 19 years. And conflicts has a lot to do with that. They also result in lower quality and vitality ratings, and we'll have more slides on that later. They can't grow properly. You're trying to make something live in a concrete box or next to a home. Overhead power lines, risk of fire. We did actually have experienced that in one of the storms. Some Washingtonian palms actually caught on fire because they touched the lines. So there is that risk as well that not a lot of people think about. Also, you know, your fences or these are all the ones that we went through. Underground utilities, you know, these are street trees. So they all had cable, they all had water. You know, how does that relate? And when they, because of the pruning that's happening and the mitigation of it, are you cutting the roots? Are you cutting a large stem or leader? Now, when something like a storm or maybe it's just now got some bad pruning wounds in it and the decay starts to happen, is it going to lift up the utility? Is it going to break the water line? You know, is it growing over it? So all of these things impact our street trees, and usually by year 19, they're coming out. And for like an oak tree, it's still a baby. It's still a juvenile. We have not gotten that full return on that investment of planting that $3,000 tree by the time you get the watering, the labor, the cost to do all of it. And then we're ripping it out in 19 years before we can get that return on investment. So something to think about as we move forward, maybe with planting. And that's what we move into next.
So doing it 10 feet back from the curb, does that alleviate this problem of conflict?
It could. Another expert in the area we are blessed in Florida, really honestly, to have a lot of experts really, really close. Deborah Hilbert from the University of Florida did her PhD on tree growth and how far to do from hard pavements and those things like that. And I would love to present that information to you. She has a whole formula that if you have an oak tree, by the time the root flare happens, on average, you need 1.5 times this times. There's a whole formula to go with it, and
Just to be clear, the 10-foot is not like a city ordinance or a planting plan. That's about defining what trees were included with, as defined in city right-of-way for the purpose of the survey, correct?
Oh,
correct,
thank you for.
right, defining what the street tree was. Very good,
Because
thank you.
what I'm seeing in looking at this, if these are issues, then it would be as if we are not going to be able to have trees in these areas. And I'm well aware, because I walk a lot, that the trees create the shade that make my life so much more enjoyable, especially with this big heat, because they're covering my path walking on the road or the sidewalk. So if we were not to have this, then there'd be less shade, and when we're outside, we would be subject to all of this intense heat. So
That's the next discussion,
you
right?
need to figure this out.
No, I will be your knowledgeable facilitator while you can figure this out.
Right. It's a conundrum.
It is, you know,
Yes.
and to give you some of my backstory, I've been with the city as of July for 16 years. I started as a brush hog, you know, pulling weeds and all the rest of that. So I've seen a lot of these conflicts fail. And actually that has led to me issuing permits the way I do, because I've seen them fail when they look like they're green. Or I've seen these conflicts causing a problem, and I've seen them fall over with a water line underneath them. So these are all, you know, every slide is a conversation that we need to have. And and as one of my favorite urban foresters says, you know, this is a hard conversation to start. It's necessary to have, and we've got to keep this conversation going. So,
We may end up looking at the whole way that our infrastructure is designed to be more harmonious with nature in general.
there are some things that are out there that are newer, engineered sidewalks, Silvacells. Because they are newer, they don't have the research behind them. So again, you know, pushing that into design standards, planting spaces, it's a whole, you know, another layer of the conversation to keep going on. We did try to find some planting spaces. The interns, as they saw anything, they marked its location. They told me what it was, you know, if it's pavers, if it's mulch, if it's gravel. A paver example would be an old tree well downtown that's now, you can definitely see where the tree was, and now it's been pavered over. That's predominant, that's why it's 1%. A lot of those actually were on Pinellas Avenue, so. Trying to be proactive and figure out where we can put some new ones. Condition. This is the nuts and bolts of what you guys want to know, honestly. As we put the slide together, and you can see we're all over the spectrum. These are actually, the ratings from these are industry, based off of industry practices. Dr. John Bond, as well as the CTLA method, really went into trying to create our version of this. %8 of the trees downtown in our project area are fair or better.
That's good.
I think that's pretty
Yeah.
good out there. 3% is dead, so we will, or 4% very poor. So they were flagged, and I've been going out there and identifying them, and do they need to be removed? Do they not need to be removed? So, but honestly, most of that 4% is going to probably be removed. iTree. Have you guys ever heard of iTree? So remember those big plastic, clear, transparency sheets with all the dots, and you had to overlay it on your aerials to be able to randomly do points. iTree took that all away, and they've done everything on the computer for you. It does do random sampling, and I did use another tool that I'll talk about in a couple other slides. It's all industry standard stuff. It's been by the USDA. We are allowed to use it for free as long as you give them credit. So thank you, iTree, and all the collaborators. And this helps to calculate canopy. So we did 2 versions of the canopy assessment. We did one for the project area, and then we also did one for the whole city. And for the project area, we are looking at 29.44% is actually tree lined and covered. So what does that go back to? All of our trees are privately owned. Our tree cover is actually privately owned. And the big one for impervious, we're at 47% impervious surface out there. And that's going to be your downtown streets, your parking lots, the sponge docks area. So that's what makes up our project area. The citywide.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, just to make sure I understand that correctly. So 47% of our city property
In our project area
in our project area is concrete.
is impervious.
Wow.
Either a building, sidewalk. So when you see all the little points that I have on the bottom, everyone zoomed into a picture that was probably maybe 20, 30 feet off the ground, so you could see the whole area around it, and it was tree, no tree, what did it fall into the category? If it touched a little section of a mangrove or a species that we had decided it was a tree, we called it a tree. If it touched ground, turf, we called it, herbaceous. If it was on the building, a driveway, we did call pools impervious. Yes, they have water. I did think that because of all of our bayous and all of our, especially for the city-wide and the retention ponds, we did put water into the mix as one of the categories.
And this is explaining the relative area where city trees are located, right? It's not the total land like the total land cover of the whole of all the city areas. This is where the trees are located. This area under canopy cover.
This is actually more of a shapefile you drop in there, and then you use Google Maps, and it shows you where it is. It is the entire city. It's all the city-defined boundary.
Okay. Yeah.
Shannon?
Yeah, of course.
And in the chart there on the right, the green one, it says imperious instead of impervious.
Oh, thank you. I will fix that. So the city actually is a lot high, not a lot higher than when I did it in 2018. We were at 32%. Now we're at 35%. And in a few slides, I'll show you how other cities manage on that number. But the city collectively, within our city boundary, is at 31.4% impervious. The second tool that we're going to finish up using is iTree Eco. So you take all of this data, you put it into their software, and they come up with numbers for you, and they start to extrapolate it. And they come up with a report. And all the different items that are listed on the left-hand side, function analysis, structure composition, forecasting and modeling, and pest risk management, all will come from iTree Eco. It is older software. So checks and balances, if you want to call it, there are other ways to manage the values of trees. There is the Landscape Association. With palms, I actually called our contractor, and specifically for Sable Palm, if we lost all of them and wanted to replace them, it would be $1,094,800 just to replace the palm species. If you remember from the previous slide, makes up 28% of our canopy of street trees. And that's only one species. The hardwoods, we started to do some trying to learn the software and messing with it. Early estimates just for the hardwoods is $3 million, $3.4 million. I will get coming soon will be the final data on all of that. I am working with GIS. We were having software input issues with the palm species themselves. So Matt and I are actually going to be working on that next week and going back out and measuring some palms.
So to me, when I hear 1 million or 3 million, I don't think that's a lot of money.
Look how
I
smaller,
mean,
yeah.
It's not a lot of money for what the trees do. And I mean, they do so many things on so many levels. And when you look at the survey results, people recognize that without really going into this in much depth. So for a city to spend $1 million is like not a lot of money for what you get back. So, so what I'm sort of trying to say, when you say those numbers, you should like, yeah, it's only $1 million, and not like, oh, because it really isn't in the long run a lot of money. And and I just want to say one thing about palm trees is that palm trees aren't as environmentally helpful as the big trees. But we're in Florida, and so people expect, because to see palm trees, right? Like you go to St. Pete and they've lined their streets with palm trees, and now they're probably changing it, but because of more knowledge. But that's a public issue in terms of what people think
The
we should
tropical
have.
perception.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Robin?
I'll be quick, because I know you have a lot to get through, but I think, you know, what would be an interesting thing to see would be if, say there's $1 million to remove all the palm trees, and those were planted with trees that were either native species or positive effect species or whatever, to see what the cost-benefit analysis over time. So that, you know, okay, never mind, go ahead.
And that's part of it as well. And that's why I really want to do my due diligence on this section of it before I give you any of that. And that $1 million is the cost to replace,
Okay,
not
right,
the cost to
okay.
remove.
Oh, okay.
And the way,
Drop in the bucket.
and remember, this is just a
Please.
small part of tarpon.
Yeah,
Remember, you know, we're probably dealing with what? Maybe a fifth of tarpon for our project area. So when we start to move out into the residentials, what are we going to find? You know, what are we going to find there? So, and with the dollar value, this goes into the management plan side. We have a, you know, what, if we put those two numbers together just on a rough dollar figure for this 1/5 of the city, we've got a $5 million asset we don't have a management plan for.
right.
So, that's it. So, some of the key surprises that we saw, 95% native.
Wow.
24% of our, you know, is mangrove. Wind tolerance. We went through some scientific data, we found some research that has been done. Roughly 20% of the trees out there within our project area has a high wind tolerance. 57% have no rating, so they have not been categorized. That would be something like a Japanese blueberry. That would be something like a silver buttonwood. You know, we've got little knowledge on 50, you know, half of our, for the wind tolerance at least. And again, toting the excellent, the good, and the fair. You know, that really did surprise me, especially some of these larger oak trees that we have down in the historic district and things like that. The canopy assessment, I told you I'd show you different numbers. We're at 35%, Clearwater's 31, Dunedin's 41. Where I got these numbers from, a study happened with the University of Florida right after the new tree law went into, or the 165, and they have an entire website about all the different areas and who reported back to them. They had UF students go through all of these areas and confirm the numbers, so that's where I'm getting these numbers from. So it's UF-based research, and if you want me, I can give you the web link for that. I should have put that in there.
have a question about the native species. I thought we were saying that like 20-something% were camphor trees, which are not native.
Correct.
Is that 20% of the invasives or camphor trees?
Yes, of the 4%. We have a 4% invasive, right? Let me go back to that.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking 30%, when you showed it before, I was thinking 30% of our tree canopy was invasive species of camphor trees. That's what I was like,
4.23% is non-native. So and then of that 20, and you are correct, of that
Okay.
breakdown of the 4.
thank you. That's a lot better. Makes me feel a lot better.
I don't know if you need a break, you just get up, stretch, do anything. That was a lot of data just on the bio stuff. So the social side. My role is to build trust, builds transparency. Transparency
Can I
builds
ask a
trust.
question?
Yeah.
On your break time image, okay, so that to me was a very interesting photograph, given this report, this presentation, because what we see is a lot of sand, a lot of palm trees that create no shade when people are out there sunbathing or whatever. And then there's some shade trees up near the road. So that's, to me, a very interesting photograph, because Florida, go to the beach, whatever, but yet it, from here, it just looks so barren and uninviting.
Maybe Sunset Beach is a place that we need to start to put trees out there.
Maybe.
And Carol, all those trees, the big clump of trees there, those are all Australian pines.
Let me, is this still on here? This
The
back in
one-
here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are
This-
they?
Yes, at the beach.
Oh,
Yes, and people have nostalgia about them.
yeah. Well, I like clumps of trees. But Australian pines, you know, there's issues.
The back, behind the playground to the causeway is Australian pine. As they have failed or parking lot needed to be done, the area by the playground has been replaced with oak trees. There are, with the new, this was taken before the new pavilion's going in, there are gonna be some oak trees over here. This is all mangrove that line
Where?
the coastline, this section
Oh,
here.
they're the mangroves?
That's
I see.
mangroves. And then going all the way back to the causeway section that where it meets with Gulf Boulevard in the back, those are all mangroves as well. And there is a line of palm trees. So it's palm trees,
I see that.
sidewalk,
And where's
mangroves,
the Australian pine?
All by the playground.
right there.
There.
And up
those.
to here,
Okay.
this whole big line right there. Okay to move on?
Fascinating.
So if you're not familiar, I'm sure you are, we do have the Connect Tarpon Springs webpage. Did do the social survey. I am posting things about as they come up, when I do events. I did put the results of this. And like my thing says, my motto, transparency builds trust, trust builds engagement. This was, the social survey was all about getting the feedback. So here we go. The urban forest is very important to the people of Tarpon Springs. 82%. The feelings about an urban forestry program. So currently we do not have a program, but they have 81%, again, almost 82% believe that an urban forestry program is important to them. All of these different bar graphs are different benefits of the urban forestry that we had put in there. The residents feel, pretty knowledgeable, a little knowledgeable in every area. In the comments section, they did request for more education.
Good.
So outreach activities. How much are they, what do I need to focus my efforts on? How do they want it? And they said participating at community events like Touch a Truck, EcoFest, that is their preferred way. Community workshops, I have had them through Knowledge and Nibbles before. They are in the middle of the afternoon, so maybe we need to bring in some diversity of times and things like that. I do know the library. We are, again, fortunate to have a master gardener that lives in Tarpon Springs that does donate her time to the library and does a seminar every once in a while. But that's one area that, I'm going to start looking to explore in. And then Arbor Days activities. We have 2 tree giveaways every year. One is at Touch a Truck and one is at EcoFest. So come on out on September 16th and come get some free trees. We are working potentially on some different ideas for the Arbor Day giveaway. So watch the space for further knowledge. The top 3 ways to ensure a safe and healthy urban forest. Again, they said tree planting, more education, back to that education piece again, and then the best management practices and tree preservation. So going back to that code, going back to what we're supposed to enforce, doing a good review of that. Their opinion of the top 3 barriers, lack of a public awareness of the tree preservation plan, like you brought up before, and then having HOAs have little or no place in preservation for future plantings, lack of a formal plan, again, going back to our management plan. So it looks like they really are supportive of our next step in the phase. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me. There is other. And in other, this was a free-form response. So in your backup, as part of this, I hope you read through it, you can see all the different responses. So some that relate to this section that they pulled out, again, lack of public awareness. Some of them kept bringing up the city approving mass tree removal, subdivisions along Keister Road and Lake Tarpon, leave existing trees in place, exclamation part. So they gave examples of that. One of them said lack of opportunity for community members to be educated. So again, it's all back to education. The most urgent tree related need in their neighborhood, the tree maintenance, the tree protection from damage or removal, and again, they want to see more tree planting. This did have another section where they could do a free-form response. New development plantings of a non-native species. New development must include retention of existing native trees and site plans, say a minimum of 10%. So that individual that reported gave a species diversification, and so I thought that was a little interesting. And one of my favorite ones, good dirt for plants.
Well, I think that is one of the biggest issues about planting. So you can get the right tree, but to actually plant it, how big the hole, what do you do about making a moat for the water? What kind of soil or manure or whatever do you put in, and when do you put it in, and where do you mulch? Those are complicated, and I think that I know when I've planted some trees or anything, those are my big issues. Am I making my mix right? Am I doing this? And I think good dirt is saying, I have a neighbor who's like really good at figuring that out. Planting a tree isn't just like sticking it in the ground. There's a lot of things you have to do.
And to tie that in to the education piece, I do give them a flyer if they come to a Tree City event. And another great individual that I would love to pull in is, I believe she just got her PhD from UF, did a whole study about tree giveaways. How effective are tree giveaways? Another person that I've had communication with, Shannon Caravel, she how far does she go to, as the urban forester, to track these trees? And that's a piece that I've been looking into. Are they getting planted? Are they sitting in the bucket? Are they not sitting in the
Right.
bucket? Is the city wasting their money? And so those two people, again, I would love to have come talk to you, or maybe even pull some of their pieces together for education on that.
5 a year later, are they thriving and, what,
And Shannon does a wonderful job on that. She actually goes back 3 or 4 years later, and does drive-bys and sends them emails, and she's got it all hooked up to where after 6 months, everybody that she's plugged in automatically gets an email of please take this survey. So,
That's a great
Excellent.
idea.
so my education piece is how to do that better. But where are we? How are we doing on time?
Good.
Okay. How do they feel about the current tree canopy? We know that it's at 35% for the city, almost 29-30% for our project area. And everybody again says, okay, still needs more, poor and good. I was very surprised that the poor was up there as 22%, so. And again, I believe this one actually ties into your strategic plans about the no net canopy loss. How do we do it? So, exploring this would be another action item. Opinion over the past 10 years, the overall health and quality. A lot of people came back and said unsure. My thoughts to that is they're not educated. We got to do better on educating them. So, and this is actually the citizens' perception of it is key. Top 3 areas they feel most need of planting. They said parks, greenways, and other public spaces, the rights of way, and street trees. So they are calling for this. They all calling for this need in their area. So to me, this gave validation to the project. And the school campus area, that's something we tried to do before COVID. I went to the school, the middle school, and we tried to do a campus Arbor Day Campus K through 12 is the full name of the project. We would go in on Thursdays twice a month. We would have a project learning tree activity. It was one particular leadership class. Teresa Bedurick, who was my partner in crime on that. It was great. It was so awesome and getting them motivated. And unfortunately, COVID came and we were not allowed to finish our planting, but we were going to actually go on there and plant some trees with the kids. So, or young people, I'm sorry. If they had trees, who takes care of it? And who owns them? What are the residents' perception of who owns these street trees? A lot of them are unsure. And a lot of them said that they did, or they weren't applicable because they don't have street trees. And I think that was that 16% really that they don't have them. So we need to go out and go find them and put a tree in their yard. If you have any, who maintains them, they said themselves. The others, they don't have any again. And private landscaper was 20%. And no one, 13% said no one. And again, back to those free-form responses, I'm all about active listening. Getting feedback on what you're doing, I believe, is crucial. Even bad feedback is something to be able to learn from. So again, please go through if you haven't already, go through those comments. And I think they will dictate a lot of our thoughts and maybe moving forward in future conversations. And that brings me to, what are your thoughts? I know we've been talking about it as we go through a lot.
I think the results are incredibly encouraging, though, very supportive of tree planting and maintenance, but I don't think that they quite understood the urban forestry plan, because there was kind of a difference. I mean, there were some of the answers that seemed to reflect that that was not understood, but I think overall, it just was incredibly encouraging to hear the percentage of people that are really in favor of more trees. And they recognize the need. Any comments? Carol?
So, this is just an observation. I lived in Kansas City at one point, and the big developer, J.C. Nichols, when he went there, he developed a lot of Kansas City and all residential areas. And he actually, during World War II, developed the park system in D.C. for free. But what he did, and I don't know how to incorporate this, if you bought a house or moved into his area, they had a big nursery, and everybody got 3 trees to choose. And I am assuming they would come and plant them for them. So there was this system set up, and Kansas City became, full of trees because of this. So we've sort of touched on that a little bit. People want education, but we also need guidance, and we need professional guidance. And but if there was a network in the city set up with interns and things who could actually, you can come, you can get a tree, but you can also sign up for an intern to come or whomever, a cadre of volunteers, to come and actually help you figure out where to put the tree and plant it and set up a schedule of maintenance. Because however much we read about this, and I feel like I've done a lot, I still don't know. And it would be great to have assistance. And then when you set up that personal relationship, then you can feel comfortable to call. And, I've phoned you, but I know that you're one person for the whole city. So if we could set up that, it would be really exciting to get that engagement and create a community around trees. So anyway, that's some thoughts.
As the arborists in the area, urban foresters, whatever our title is for whatever community, we get together once a month. We call ourselves the Urban Forestry Working Group for Tampa Bay. And the one person I'm thinking of is down in St. Pete. He is awesome at not-for-profits. And the community not-for-profit world that he has tapped into are doing exactly what you're talking about. I'm just going to throw the numbers out there that I, just as an example. It's a mile stretch of road. I know he's talked about how the nonprofits came in, I think it's off of a trail or whatever, and they say they planted 50 trees in this area. Arbitrary numbers, just showing it out there. They provided the businesses a couple thousand feet of hose to go out and actually maintain these that got planted. He has tapped into that. I've asked him for some of his feedback. The St. Pete group, they do have a title. I can't think of it right now, but that is exactly what you're talking about, and they are working that system. So, all back to the partnerships. Who you're pulling in. Well, nothing else?
I have another question. So I take it that you've been in communication with the commissioners about this, and are they all supportive of what you're up to?
I have not presented this to the BOC yet.
Okay.
I wanted to come give you guys the raw data first, get your feedback, and then I know we have the final report. We're going to have to actually present that. So
I can't imagine them not being supportive of this.
They did approve applying for the grant.
So-
We're aware,
Right.
and we supported that.
Right.
That's any indication.
So my thoughts are like, what do you need from us in terms of, you know what I mean? Like, how can we, like, help?
Workshops.
Okay.
Workshops. So coming up with the strategic plan and the, sustainability committee, the sustainability plan that you guys have done, probably something very similar to that. To do the master plan for, as they call it, for the urban forestry, but probably working the system like you did with that. Come with a goal, a vision statement, pulling some of that data together, having these conversations that you've already picked up on your action items. How do we incorporate that into a master plan? And again, thank you to the Florida Forest Service. Their funding would not make this possible. And remember, this is the first step. We've got a lot more street trees out there to inventory. I have applied for the Inflation Reduction Act one for the CGEST area. But there's a lot more to do.
Are you wanting to focus on like the street trees and in that area, or are you wanting to focus on the private property because there's more opportunity, or do you see them like kind of parallel? Or do we know? And that's cool if we don't.
The street trees is, we need to know a street tree number. We do need to have that inventoried. For the next one, I also have tied in, because it is in the low income area, the potential to go in there and do the maintenance for them. That is what as what PJ and I put together. So we took the framework of this grant and then added the layer of providing the matching funds to actually do the maintenance of the trees. And in the grant, we called it up Limb Up for Safety. So, getting emergency vehicles, the 14-foot clearance for them, having in that area, there's the elementary school. We've got, how do they get to school? So all of that put together is what I was going to focus on the next one, with the also sneaking in there the tree inventory. We got to know where they are. So the two things side by side.
In the other documents, the 3A, 3I tree canopy project, the smaller attachments we have. So in there, you have these charts of tree benefit estimates, how much carbon monoxide, CO2, NO2, O3 are absorbed. And is this about our trees or just trees in general?
So that software actually has those values and those algorithms built into it for each one of those areas that I gave you. That is what that program's estimates are for what that's happening within that area. I don't have a copy of those in front of me. They do have a value number associated with those, like with the total value.
I mean, money-wise.
Money-wise,
Yeah, I see
I
that.
want to see how that compares when we get done with the iTree Eco side. I'm sure it's going to be this kind of the same algorithms that they built in and worked into it, and then I want to verify some of those numbers with what we're coming back with, with the CTLA method, and actually like what our contractor says it would be the cost to replace if we, figured out those things.
So
But-
I was surprised that CO2 was the smaller of all of them, because I think of big oak trees and things of absorbing a lot of CO2. But according to this list, ozone is what's most absorbed.
Is that because it's 28% palm?
Because what?
The question I asked was, is that because the number one species is 28% palm?
Ah, and they absorb
Less.
ozone?
They
Less
have
mon-
less
carbon
leaf coverage.
I see. So that's why the CO2 is low.
I'm not an expert on that. I can pull that in for you, and I can find you an expert on iTree if you want me to find you one to explain that to you.
I find that, I didn't know that trees absorbed ozone. And here, in this chart, ozone is absorbed far more than anything else. And that's pretty interesting to me. we've had issues with that. And nitrogen dioxide. I mean, this is an interesting chart. This is very valuable. And that's the sort of thing I think that people really want to see. I mean, what is it that these trees actually do? And, you know, why is it important that these things get absorbed? And then they get absorbed and they get put in the ground and stored.
That
That's
sequestration.
what's really important. And the other issue is, what happens when you cut down a tree? Does that stuff get put back into the atmosphere, but you keep the roots, and we all know about how the
Sequestering.
roots create a network. You know, those things are very important, you know, in addition to just the trees create shade and, you know, clean the air and all of that. All of this other stuff is where the big benefits come.
And again, I when this gets put together, I think that's going to be a really eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
So, and
These
verifying.
pages were really good, these two supplementals, and thank you for including those, Tommy.
Robin?
I know that our city tree is the mangrove, and that mangroves are exponentially much, like, as far as dealing with CO2, rebuilding shoreline, all those things, plus the sustainability and health of our ocean life and Gulf life and all that. I'm wondering if there's a separate track for mangroves, since it's terrestrial trees and mangroves are at such different levels. If there's a way to create more weight towards the mangrove trees, or at least to put that piece in there, because those are powerhouses for all the things, much more than terrestrial trees and street trees and things like that.
I will ask that question when I reach out to my contact.
Well, thank you.
Shannon, when we filled out the survey, you know, as a committee, I know I had a really burning question pretty much about alignment of city projects and how, you know, whether or not you're involved when something like the retention pond on Gross and Cypress is built, because we moved onto our street, and it was like, it was a dream location. It was magical, because when we turn on to Cypress from Gross, that whole part of the street was completely canopied. And it was beautiful to walk under in the evenings in the summer. It was just beautiful in general. And then we came to the meetings when they were talking about what was going to happen with those trees when the retention pond was built, and we were assured that they weren't being touched because they had nothing to do with the area that was being dug for the retention pond. Subsequently, the project, which has been a real pain, I think, for the city to be, you know, underwhelming in labeling it that way, they subcontracted to people that had no connection with the public that had been talked to prior to the project starting. And they just started mowing trees down. We were hysterical, not knowing who to even contact at that point, because this has been several years ago. But I'm just wondering how to prevent that type of misalignment between projects. I mean, your project is really close to all of our hearts, you know, in terms of adding more tree cover, or minimizing the urban heat island effect. I mean, everything that trees contribute, and that's really important, considering that this was, you know, we've gone through the hottest summer that is on record worldwide, and we're in the thick of it right now. But when there's that kind of misalignment, what can you do to prevent it in the future? I mean, where there's two departments working on two different projects and have different priorities and are not on the same page.
I think we can say there was a lot of lessons learned on that project. That was, you know, obviously project admin was the lead on that, but the city's done a lot of thinking about issues with that project and how to prevent recurrence, and specifically as it relates to trees. There's certainly been a lot more weight for all projects put on trying to maintain trees in place to the maximum extent possible. So, as we've implemented new projects since then, there's all the way up to the top, all the way up to the city manager and talking to Mark. I'm not in a hurry to walk up to his office with any tree removal permits anytime soon. We have definitely had a refocus on trying to maintain trees in place for future city projects.
And just I might add, Shannon's project hopefully will make this easier for all the other departments, because when we get to that system where each tree is an asset, has an asset tag, they can track it right in real time and all that. It'll be a lot easier to track what happens with that tree for the field trees, overseeing a contractor.
Okay.
So, and what's supposed to happen with it and all that. They won't have to call and try to find Shannon and try to backtrack 5 people to figure it out.
So, where I live on Chesapeake, we have that little park, and I remember with you sort of indicated that the trees in that park were old. You know, they're all covered with moss but which means that they're on their way out in some way. But there's been no effort to plant new trees to take their place. And I suspect that that's just not my little park, but within the city. And is that part of the plan, or can that be incorporated in the plan, that when it's recognized that trees are getting very old and they're not going to last too much longer, maybe 5 more years, then new trees get planted? Can be smaller trees that will grow up.
Craig Park has actually had the most succession planting at this point. That is the pride and the jewel of Tarpon Springs, you know, with all of our stuff. There has been a lot of succession planting actually in Craig Park. With your park, that would be a great place to do it. The other piece of this is the contractor side, and I really do want to change internally our contract for planting. When that comes up, you're probably going to see me do a lot more planting, because I do want the watering and the establishment to go into the contract.
Yes.
Taking that burden off of city staff and having that with a warranty to go with the tree, I think would be in the best interest and the most bang for our buck. But that is something we're going to have to talk internally about and make those decisions on an internal level. But that is my goal.
Chair, Madam Chair.
Oh.
So I'm thinking about 2 things. One is along Curlew Place, Harbor Oaks. So that was in the early days of the tree ordinance. Those trees were all planted, and the HOA had someone to plant them, someone to maintain them, someone to water them, and that is the most people walking back and forth on that strip of property because it has the most shade. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you think about it, that hasn't been that long. So I think that is a true success story and a way to show people a difference that can be, you know, the visuals of how it can look. And we're not talking about 100 years for the tree to whatever. It's like 10 years, 15 years through proper care. This is what can happen. It totally transforms that strip and that neighborhood. So that's one little thing, just as an
idea.
aside. The other thing is, at the last slide, when you said what you wanted from the committee, where do you want us to start? How are we gonna do that? What do you need from us? How are we gonna work on a vision statement? What are your thoughts on that?
So we are in a weird place. We do need to come up with a new sustainability coordinator.
True.
And internal discussion, maybe waiting for that person would be best at this
That makes
point.
sense. All right,
Good.
just so stay tuned, more to
Yes.
follow.
Uh,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So can you talk about, because I think one of our goals in the Sustainability Action Plan is native plantings for city properties. And I would imagine that would, I don't know if it would or not, but like some of the projects are state projects and they're putting in crepe myrtles and things like that. Like, how do we, where in the timeline is addressing that in, is it code, city code that needs to change, or is,
Well, FDOT projects are, they have a thing called a green book. So they, depending upon the speed of the road, the distance from the back of curb, what type of curb, those are actually dictated by FDOT projects. And they have to use those standards.
okay, but what about for city projects?
City-based projects, we would have a more flexibility on that. But I think the way you said FDOT projects, that's why I honed in
I'm just
on that.
thinking of all of them. Like, so like I'm thinking along US 19 where they planted a whole bunch of palm trees, which are,
That was all done by
Right.
FDOT.
and then I'm thinking, I think it was the state where they planted like the crepe myrtles in the middle of the road on Tarpon Avenue.
That would be Pinellas Avenue.
Okay. And then, I don't know, and I can't think of a city example, but when we do projects, have we put it, is it already in place that we're only using native species?
I'd have to go to a particular project to think of, and be able to pull that in there for you, honestly.
We have to use the city tree, excuse me, I don't know why I'm so hoarse today. We have to use the city tree schedule to determine what trees get planted on city property, correct?
We do have a flexibility to choose the right tree for the right place. Without thinking of a particular project, I know we've talked about. I try to do more native trees. Actually, the Mirrors project, those palms down there, those royals are actually Florida royals. Without the FDOT projects, that's an FDOT project.
And just,
Yeah,
Dory,
Robin.
those, the crepe myrtles along Pinellas Avenue, when those were planted, those, the utilities were all supposed to be undergrounded at that time. Which is why I think they went for something that didn't have a lot of roots or a lot of whatever, and then that fell through to where the utilities were never underground and the trees remain. So I think that it's part of a different piece of that was in there as well.
Utility companies do have in state statutes, they do regulate what can be planted in their right of way. So if it's underneath I get the regular ones to the house, they can only have up to 14 feet genetic potential. They're not allowed to prevent the field gate look or the one-armed look. Also, as you can see from Duke Energy going around town, if you've got the taller transmission lines, and it's based off the kilowatt or voltage or whatever the actual term is, how far vegetation can be from them to be able to maintain those high-intensity ones. And like the ones that are on Diston, that one particularly is 30 feet from each side. So it's a 60-foot wide area that can't have vegetation. So for utilities, that all comes into play, and that's actually under state statute.
So, one thing you mentioned was water. So, I'll go back to my little park on Chesapeake. If they just put in grass, that's another issue. But it's now being irrigated. And it's unclear to anybody, is that potable water that they're using to irrigate? Because there's not reclaimed water there, and I don't know if they dug a well. So one of the things about new plantings and all is they have to be watered. So that's a big issue then. How is the city going to water these things? And using potable water just isn't the best idea. So if we dig wells, a lot of us have wells, but then, you are taking water from the aquifer, and as we get droughts, then your wells have an issue.
And they're brackish.
Yeah, can be. And then the question then of reclaimed water, lots of places aren't set up for reclaimed water. No one on our street has reclaimed water. So I would think that part of this project has to think about, how are we going to water all of this? And that's a whole other kettle of fish. So, is that part of this plan?
It's gonna be another great discussion item. Break
A
open that
big
onion.
one. Yeah,
Like to hear the microclimate effect of trees. Creating more moisture, and
yeah, well, that too.
that's so necessary.
Or can we have a desalinization plant to water our trees? Use that sort of water, or other types of water that's not potable. So anyway, you said the word and it was like ting, 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 ting. And, that's oftentimes what happens in all of these things, and I know you're well aware of that. We get so focused on this that we forget to look at all of the consequences and other things that are part of the bigger network that have to be addressed.
As I say, scroll out. You gotta, scroll out on the Zoom.
Yeah.
I just want to address Dory's earlier question regarding scheduling on the plan. Year one action items include the net zero canopy loss policy and also an ordinance requiring control of invasive species on city property. So those will both be year one action items.
Thank you.
Any more questions here?
That's all I
Jen?
have.
Thank you so much.
So happy to have you
Yes.
here and doing this project.
And
Bravo.
you did a stellar job answering all our questions, explaining all the details, and we really appreciate it. I know you had so much material to cover, but it was rich.
It's teamwork. It
was
really takes
very
a team.
rich. Yeah.
So,
Thank
thank you,
you.
project team.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Tommy is going to share with us an update on the sustainability coordinator recruitment. If you're ready.
That's good news, Tommy.
We've got really good news. I think I might have talked myself hoarse during the interview process. I'm not sure what happened. We did interviews this morning and everything was going great. So we've had a great response on recruiting. We are already in the interview process. We had over 40, and I think we might have had over 50 applicants. We wanted to move very quickly to get someone up and running as soon as possible to start making progress. And we've had a really great diversity of candidates, ranging from folks with, 15, 20, 30 years experience in sustainability to folks like right out of school and right out of USF in the sustainability programs. I don't want to say too much about the what we're looking for because we've got tomorrow is our last day of interviews, so I don't want to give any candidates an unfair advantage over folks that might have interviewed earlier in the week. But we've been doing interviews all this week. We've already shortlisted, and I think we've definitely got some candidates that that are viable candidates at this point, and we would be happy to have on the city staff. And in this type of hiring market, it's usually a little bit of a challenge to find good folks, and it's nice for once to have a plethora of good people to pick from that could all do good work for the city in their own way. And I think at this point, we're just looking for who's right for our community and what combination of skill sets we really want over the next couple of years. So things are going quite well, and we are hoping to wrap up the interview and recruitment process over the next couple of weeks, and then go through background checks. And depending on the situation, we might even have some news on a hire at the next meeting.
Oh, wonderful.
That is fantastic.
So
Yeah.
how many people are you interviewing? Is this a finalist list?
Our first, we did not make a determination on if we were going to do 2 rounds or 1 round. We tried, we want to keep that open. Right now, we've cut our list from 40 plus, almost 50 applicants down to our top 7. We've done 6 interviews. We've got 1 more tomorrow, and from there we'll deliberate, see what we've got, see who would be happy here and be the best fit for Tarpon Springs.
And who's conducting the interviews?
We've got a really good panel. It's myself, Paul Smith, Renee from Planning and Zoning Director, and PJ, our grant project specialist from Project Admin. That's something I always try and do. I don't like to load up our committees with all managers. I like to have some staff on there. It's like, hey, pick your coworkers. And obviously, grants go pretty heavily with sustainability. There's a lot of opportunity out there, so we wanted someone who would work well with PJ. And also, we've got Michelle Kozial, who was previously in utilities, and she's now in HR. So she's sitting in for HR.
Excellent.
And then does Mark get involved in this eventually?
Yeah, Mark approves all the hires.
Okay,
So
but he doesn't do the interviews?
not typically for these types of positions. We have been keeping Mark up to date.
Exciting.
I think it really speaks to the zeitgeist of sustainability, that everything, that this was an explosion of applicants. I mean, I think that that's so rare right now, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, and this was also a learning opportunity for us on recruiting too. So we had a really great exit interview with Robin, and we talked to her about recruiting and what people are looking for in the sustainability world. We were able to, obviously, she just did a little bit of job hunting too, so we were able to kind of pick her brain a little bit about where to go. And we've been kind of experimenting a little bit in this one with new recruiting techniques. Like we started using LinkedIn kind of for the first time in public services. To reach out. We've also been working heavily on Indeed and we've had candidates from, right here in Pinellas County all the way out to Arizona and up north of the Midwest. So we've had a lot of folks from all over the country that are potentially interested in coming to work here. So it's a nice change of pace actually in this kind of recruiting environment.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you for the good news.
Yeah.
Excellent. So items for the next meeting agenda, and Tommy and I had been talking about not trying to thank you.
Thank
Not
you.
trying to overload anything in the agenda that really should wait until we have a new person here. So what did we mention that we might follow up? I mean, I would love to hear more from Shannon. She said she had some other experts that, and needed to have a little time to connect.
Yeah, I know we had kicked around water, right? We'd been talking a little bit maybe about learning about reverse osmosis a bit, which was
That's
also
right.
topical.
Yeah, and we wanted, if anybody is interested, we would really like to set up a time to tour the plant
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
and to get firsthand understanding of what's going on there.
I've done that through the Citizens Academy. That's how I met Paul. And it's fascinating. And we could we can't hold our meeting there, can we?
We'd have to look into that. At the minimum, we could definitely do like a pretty cool presentation about water supply issues in the state and where our water comes from. Would be very topical. But we could explore potentially doing like a field trip. Maybe we'll see what happens. I think that might be new for advisory committees, but I think that we've had some other advisory committees do site visits and whatnot. We'll see.
The ground.
So
I don't want to overcommit here, so.
I would like to, in that sort of interim, just have some conversation about what we'd like to do, like these questions. Well, what can we do? What, you know, and look at the action statements. What are the first ones? And, you know, here's a workshop for us just to get our heads around what we can do next and how to think about that before we get a person. Because oftentimes what happens, it seems, is we get, oh, we want you to do this, we want you to do that, instead of having a bigger picture that maybe we can think about.
You mean how we can support the launching of the sustainability plan?
That
And
how do
how
the
we can
tree
support
thing-
the
yeah.
coordinator's work.
And
in
what
doing
do
that.
these workshops look like? How can we construct workshops and just so that we've thought about it before somebody comes to us and said, we'd like you to do that.
Well, it's possible that, from what Tommy said, we might have somebody here by next month.
Oh.
Is that,
I think our
Possibility.
goal is definitely to be at least working through the hiring process, and you know, obviously, a lot of folks are like that we're interviewing are already working and stuff like that. So depending on
Right.
what they have to do with their current employers or relocating or
October
whatnot,
is more
that
realistic.
may or may not work out to have the new person in here in 4 weeks. That's a little tight, but I think by the following meeting, unless something goes really awry with our hiring schedule, we would definitely have someone in place in October for the meeting, and probably a bit sooner than that. So it just is a little bit up in the air if it'll be at the next committee meeting.
So that could be a good time for us just to review.
Yeah, we could do just a discussion on the first year's action items.
okay.
And also, I think one thing that we had kicked around too, I believe we can talk with Shannon and see if she'll have additional information as a follow-up. That might be, that also leads straight into some of the other action items for year one, so.
I think that the person who's the new person would probably want to be part of those presentations, don't you think?
I actually tend to think so. That's one thing that we really do want to talk about with, once we get someone on board is, everyone's, you know, we've got a lot of folks with like good project management experience and, that are used to like leading these sorts of programs. So, we really want to give the new coordinator an opportunity to put their arms around this problem, think a little bit, and prioritize, and also get used to our city organizational structure. And you know, obviously, some of these are ordinances; they're going to have to go through planning and zoning, working with other departments. So it might take them a little bit to get to know the city organizational structure, who's in charge of what, and make their own plan for how to implement. So. You know, obviously, if we had someone on board now, that's exactly what we would be doing, is making a plan for how to start working through these action items, but that'll probably start fairly rapidly.
Okay, well, thank you. Any more comments, Tommy? Staff comments?
No staff comments.
Okay. Committee comments? We're all good?
Good.
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Or
second
adjourn.
it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.